Welcome back to another episode of the Two Dates and a Dash podcast. I'm your host, Matt Cubbler. On today's episode, I interview Lacey Morgan. She is a professional doula. If you don't know what that is, Google it, because I had to. But boy, did I learn a lot today on this episode. She's an amazing person with an amazing story. So sit back and relax and enjoy this episode of the Two Dates and a Dash podcast. What is up, podcast land? Welcome to another episode of the Two Dates and a Dash podcast. I'm your host, Matt Cubbler. Before I introduce my special guest today, Lacey Morgan, first tell everybody where they can find the audio podcast, which is pretty much everywhere. iTunes, Stitcher, Spotify, iHeart, Pandora, you name it. Wherever you listen to audio podcasts, that's where you can find the Two Dates and a Dash podcast. All that I ask is that you hit the automatic download button and subscribe. That way you get new episodes when they come out. You don't have to go searching for them. They're going to be there once you open up the app. And it helps my metrics by knowing how many people are actually downloading and listening to my show. If you want to watch the show, you can go to my YouTube channel, youtube.com and / one of them slashes, Matt Cubbler. All I ask there is that you subscribe and hit that little bell thingamajiggy at the bottom. That lets you know when a new episode's coming out. That way I know that you're paying attention, which helps me give a shit about putting stuff out. If you want to learn more about me personally, and what I've done in my career and what I do to help kids as far as leadership, mentorship programs, or to get a copy of my book I wrote called A Brother's Love, a Memoir, which is the single greatest accomplishment of my life. It is the book I wrote outlining my life growing up with my older brother, Andy, who was autistic and had a severe stutter. And it's his life through my eyes because sadly he was killed in a car accident in 1989 when I was 18 years old. And so his story is now forever told in the pages of that book. And his name will live on forever, which is kind of what everybody hopes for. So if you want to learn more about me, go to mattcubbler.com and you can get a copy of A Brother's Love and Memoir there, or go to Amazon or wherever else books are sold online. One last thing. So a buddy of mine wrote a book called Code Over Conduct. It's a New York Times bestseller. Matthew Cole, C-O-L-E. He's an investigative journalist who I've come to know over the last 5 years or so during my investigative work, since we're both investigating the Navy SEALs for conduct that is not necessarily exemplary. And his book is about SEAL Team 6 and the corruption within the teams, the criminal conduct, the murders, the things that have happened that don't make Americans proud and should not be allowed to exist in a society like we have, and they are not being held to the standard by which they try to claim that they have. So I highly recommend everybody read it. He names names. A lot of the people in that book I've also interviewed in my investigation in a different matter. And it's just a brilliantly done and brave book to write. So Code Over Country, Matthew Cole, New York Times bestselling author. Please go pick that up. All right. I think that's it. Without further ado, Lacey, how are you?
I'm good, Matt. How are you?
I'm good. It's been a busy couple of days. I had some car issues, and I have my newest car is a 2011. I am not a car guy. I've only owned one new car in my life. Everything else has been a used car because they don't hold the same value to me that maybe other people have. So I have a 2010 VWCC, which is my baby, the silver bullet. Hasn't cost me much money at all since I bought it 3 years ago, almost 4 years ago. I had to get a water pump. So it's kind of whenever I'm down a car, it's like I wear glasses. If I had lost my glasses, that would cause me massive anxiety, and not having a car causes me massive anxiety. So been dealing with that. And then sadly, lost a friend yesterday who was one of the 2 state troopers killed on I-95 in Philadelphia by a drunk driver. And he was young, just started his career. He was a firefighter where I'm a police officer. And I've known him since he was 16. He's 29. And just got married, just bought a house. Wife's due to have a baby in a couple months. So it was a sad day. And, I know his family very well. And what do you say?
Let her know if she wants a doula that we can help her.
I will. I definitely will. I'll be seeing them tomorrow. So God rest the souls of those 2 troopers and the civilian that was killed as well, who was, for whatever reason, walking on I-95 and 12:30 in the morning. And I hope the book is thrown at the young woman who was allegedly driving drunk and struck and killed all three of them. So Brandon Cisco is my buddy, and Trooper Mac, his partner, God rest their souls, and hopefully their families get every benefit that is due to a hero's passing such as theirs. So, so that's been me. What's up with you?
What's up with me? I don't know, living life, we're celebrating a bunch of birthdays this month and next month. So it's kind of the season of family and fun, and working a whole bunch. That's pretty much my life.
So this is going to be the first show. I've had like sex therapists. I've had people that have different professions, but this is probably the most, because I didn't even know when we met. I didn't even know when you said what you did. I was like, and we're not going to say it yet, but when you said what you did, I'm like, I don't know what I've never even heard the word before. So before we might as well ask you the question. I ask everybody else. I don't want to get too far ahead of ourselves because we could go quickly down a road and we'll never get the question asked. So, and that would screw up my run of 132 now episodes where I ask the same question. So we don't want to be this one to be the one that throws it off the rails. Although if it did, it would be probably worthwhile. But who is Lacey Morgan?
That's a really good question, Matt. I'm still trying to figure that out. I guess I would say I am a person who empowers other people and an educator. Put those two things together.
So I know a little bit about it. We had me, you, and Lacey 1.0 had I call her Lacey 2.0. There's Lacey 1.0. Had a nice little conversation while I was supposed to be going in lifting, instead sitting outside and kibitzing with you guys, and never actually did my workout. But you were an educator in public school in suburban Philadelphia. Yeah. You did that for quite a while, and then all of a sudden you said, you know what? I'm done. Actually,
before I said I was done, I was a public school educator for 17 years, and really kind of halfway through that, I had my own daughter. I had a really crappy birth experience, and it kind of started me on this path of doing the work that I do. Am I allowed to say what I do now?
Now you can, because first of all, everybody, when you hear it, I want if you to throw in the comments on YouTube when you hear this. Clearly, it's not live, but put in your comments. I want to know, by show of hands, how many people know what a
what a doula is.
Doula, D-O-U-L-A, right?
Got it. Yep.
What's the thing in the back of your head? Medulla
oblongata.
That's what I was thinking the whole time when you said. I'm like, is she missing part of that? Like, does she really think like she works with her medulla oblongata? Like, then no, that's not what it is. Please tell everybody what it is.
Yeah, so a doula is a professional support person who helps families through their pregnancy and childbirth experience, and then into the postpartum period. So I stole it from my mom. I'll give her the credit where it's due. I'm everything that a woman wants her partner to be, only we know what we're doing. So you bring us along and we tell your husband how to be really supportive and helpful.
So I share with you my views on childbirth. So I'm the rare, like God has a sense of humor. So I will lead with that. So I have two children. My daughter Rebecca is 24. My son Andrew is 19. And neither of which did I see the birth of. I was present because I had a rule, like, and not to get too graphic, but I need to be with my wife later. Mm-hmm. And I'm a visual guy, and I hold memories through visualization, right? So I didn't want to have memories coming up at moments when I was supposed to not have that memory, right? We'll leave it at that. So I was a hand holder back rubber, right? Yep. Like, you can do this, push. I got you. I love you. You're doing amazing. Like, I was really, really good at that, but I wanted no parts of the birthing or even the post until it looked like a baby. That was my rule. Like, my daughter came out with Crisco, right? That's what I called it. And I said, that is no. Clean her up. Yeah. We're not cutting cords, right? I don't do any of that. Like, I'm not a participant in that. So fast forward to 2012, December 6th, 2012, 6 something in the morning, I'm on duty and I get a maternity call for the parking lot of TD Bank in Collegeville. And typically as a cop, maternity calls are like having labor pains, and then the ambulance comes and you're just there to make sure they need to carry anything or go get something out of the ambulance. I'm not really there for an active component. So I walk up and there's a woman standing on the passenger side with the passenger side door open. And she looked older. She definitely wasn't having a baby. I walk up, I said, hey, like, I'm always Mr. Chipper. Anything that's stressful, I always try to like put comedy into it. I said, hey, so here, we're having a baby here today. And she looks at me with this face like, oh shit. And I said, what's up? She's like, we're having a baby. I said, okay, calm down. Where's the patient at? She goes, right here in the seat. I said, all right. She moves out of the way, and I shit you not, there's a woman. Now, mind you, at this point in time, I don't remember what she looks. I didn't even know what she looked like when it was all done. Even somebody would have said what she looked like when I told you. I saw a foot in the door, between the door and the jamb of the car, because the car door was open, and then another one up on the dash. And I look down and I see a vagina and the start of a head coming out. Yeah. And I'm like, oh shit, we're having a baby. Like right now we're having a baby. And I look to the left, and still at this point, she has no face. To me, she has no face. And I see in the back, and there's 2 kids, like a 3 and 4-year-old in car seats. I'm like, all right, I got to get kids out of the car. We got them. So I got them out, put them in the back of my police car, and I came back, and there's more of the baby out, right? And I'm like, ma'am, I need you to stop pushing. And she goes, I can't stop pushing. And you can hear the sirens coming, right? I said, stop, listen. I said, that's the people that know what they're doing. They're almost
they don't know
here.
What doing that.
And she goes, no. You're all I've got. And I'm like, this is not the face of the man you want doing this for you. She goes, you're all I've got. So she starts pushing, and I don't have gloves on. I don't have anything. So I'm like elbow deep in this thing. And I'm just trying not to drop a baby. That's all I cared about. I didn't know what to do once the whole thing was out, but I'm trying to control this complete anxiety attack I'm having at the moment, but then also going, please God, don't kill this baby. Please God, don't drop this baby. Like, that's all I cared about. Yeah. Finally, the ambulance shows up. Baby's 3/4 of the way out. Just the legs need to come out, and whatever else follows. And long story short, baby's safe and healthy. His name's Isaac. He's going to be 10 this December. And back to I didn't know what she looked like. So 2 years later, I'm at a local pizza shop. And it's Mother's Day of all days.
No kidding.
And this woman walks in holding a toddler. And the woman's Chinese. And so is the baby. And she walks over. She goes, are you Officer Matt? I said, I am. She goes, hi. And it was just like a silent. I'm like, hi. Like, I'm waiting for, like, I need help with something. I gotta, like, this. But it was like this, like, I'm supposed to know you.
Yeah, silence. Some kind of context.
All right. So I'm like, can I help you with something? She leans in with the baby, like, at me and goes, Isaac? I went, oh, shit, you're Chinese. That's the first thing that came out of my mouth. And she goes, yeah. I'm like, honestly, if somebody would have told me, what did the lady look like who had the baby? I would have never been able to say Chinese because I never saw your face. All I remember is your vagina and a baby coming out of it. And when I told you that's why I didn't ever want to see that with my wife, that would have been all I would ever see.
Yeah.
I'm a visual memory guy. God has great humor, but I know myself. So now I at least know they're Chinese, which is great. And every year we connect, and it's a cool thing. But I would never want to go through that again. Mm-hmm. A, seeing a baby coming out, or B, being the one who has to deliver it. What is it about? I mean, you obviously you're a caring person because you were a teacher, right? You educated kids. You cared about the future of our society by making sure kids were educated enough and mature enough and capable enough to go out into the world and become, hopefully, producers, not just consumers in our
Yeah.
society. Where did the whole doula thing come into play?
Yeah. So because I had a really crappy first birth experience, I wanted something different moving forward. And I didn't
Explain crappy, if you don't mind, if you
crappy.
can.
Yeah, I wanted a natural birth. I wanted to be completely left alone. But I had let other people influence my view of pregnancy and labor and the risks that come with it. And so I went into it with fear, um, feeling like I needed to have a baby in a hospital. I am not the kind of person who ever should have had a baby in a hospital. So long story short, I had a cesarean after having all the things that I didn't want to have happen, because the interventions led to my daughter's heart rate dropping and they cut her. So you put all of that together, and then they blamed me for it, said that she got cut on a bone spur on my hip. So lies upon lies. Anyway, long story short, I didn't want to do that again. And so I had a home birth, and it was great. And I learned at that point that there were these jobs that people had to help women to do what they wanted to do and to feel empowered in their birth choices and to reduce the fear in the situation. And I was like, oh my God, here it is, the job I've been looking for my whole life, something to help others feel strong and capable and get to be there when new humans enter the world, Matt. There's nothing better than being there the day that a new life begins.
I think, there's no doubt that the process, like the miracle of birth, like the fact that inside of another human being is another human being.
Yeah.
And that human being is alive. And the concept is difficult to believe when you think about the environment inside of the womb. I mean, it's like a super efficiency apartment, right? Like it's super small. There's not a lot of movement. It's why the kicking happens. That's why you feel everything but everything's happening. And that miracle of going from a cell to a human is phenomenally awesome.
Yeah, it is.
Not everyone is equipped to handle the ta-da moment, right? How did you know? Like, I just think so I'll give you I think I'm with you on the expectation, like what I thought having my first child was going to be like in a hospital with professionals, quote unquote, and what they were going to do. And it's not like my wife's our first child, her first labor was like 36 hours.
Wow.
And she was 5 weeks early, and there was a whole bunch of that kind of stuff. But I remember, and I'm a very assertive man, and if I see something, I say it. So I'm holding my wife's hands and rubbing her back, and the OBGYN is like over across the room washing his hands, and he's looking over and giving instruction. Yeah, you're looking good. But at this point, there's nobody down in the catcher stance.
Right.
Nobody's there waiting for my child to come out. But he's giving descriptions as if the child's on his way out.
Mm-hmm.
And all I could think of and then say is, maybe you should get the fuck over here. How about you do something? I don't need you coaching from 35 feet away. I need you in there, making sure this thing happens. But how do you know? Well, talk to me as if I'm a woman. How would I know that that's not what I want versus a doula is what I want? Like, I wouldn't know, clearly not being a woman, but I wouldn't know what the difference is between the two and why one may be more suitable for me than the other.
Yeah. So we don't replace the medical professional. So if you're pregnant, you're either going to hire an OBGYN or a midwife.
Let's start there. What is the obviously there's some degrees possibly that are different as far as medical certifications, but what is the technical difference in what the process is between the two, if there is any?
Yeah. So an OB is a trained surgeon first. They learn how to surgically deliver babies.
Gotcha.
And then some basic understanding of the physiology of what natural labor is supposed to be like. But they also learn about, interventions and how to encourage labor to happen.
Is that when they say they induce labor, essentially? Okay.
Yep. Or, they augment it if it's not going, kind of textbook standard. So as a general rule, and I want to preface this with saying that there are really amazing obstetricians in this area in particular who practice really good medicine. But as a general rule, OBs are people who view labor as a situation that needs to be managed, medically attended to, whereas a midwife tends to lean towards viewing labor as a process to be observed and supported if it needs support. But they don't come at it from a lens of feeling like their presence is necessary for things to go safely.
That makes sense.
Yeah.
So when you as a doula, you are I'm trying to think of a good, you're like the flight control guy. You're the one that's making sure everybody in the process is comfortable, is aware, is focused in the moment when things need to be focused upon, whether it's support, whether it's encouragement, whether it's pushing. Like, is that kind of in my head, that's where I'm thinking you're like you're up in all these things are happening, like the planes are all trying to land and you're trying to make sure they all land at the right time in the right order.
Yeah, I mean, you could say that. I always equate it to a coach, right? Like, we're there to inform you about your options, to help you process your choices. Like, your baseball coach is going to pat you on the back when you have a great success in life, just like they will if you have great success on the field. And they'll be there to pick up the pieces if shit hits the fan,
Right.
So yeah, I mean, we're there to make sure that the person who's in labor and their partner understand choices, that they feel like they have a voice in the delivery room, and to, really offer the hands-on support. So you were rubbing your wife's back for 36 hours. That can be exhausting, and so we take over for you so that you can go to the cafeteria and eat, or go to the bathroom and not feel guilty about it. Or, if your wife's not going to divorce you, like, take a nap during that 36 hours.
First of all, I think it's a very noble and very selfless profession, but also one that requires a certain personality trait. Like, I don't know if, and correct me if I'm wrong, I don't know if doula, the title of becoming a doula is something where I have my problem with law enforcement is it went from being a profession where, like, I knew when I was 6, I wanted to be a cop. Mm-hmm. Like, I always knew, like, I was predestined. I was chosen for that line of work. I was built to live in that environment. And then law enforcement shifted to a professional. And I use the term professional, not meaning that we didn't handle ourselves professionally, but they made it a profession in which they were handpicking people from other walks of life, like people that graduated college and went and were accounting majors or philosophy majors. And they're attracting these people to our profession by luring them into a decent paid job with benefits and a good pension, when those people had options that were before them that may not have first been police work. And it's changed the dynamic of law enforcement exponentially because we have a lot of people that weren't necessarily built to do the job. They took the job because of the perks, but didn't necessarily, they're not meant to be doing the job the way that the job needs to be done. Do you find, first of all, are there a lot of doulas? Number one. And number two, is there a certain personality type of the ones that you probably are very well connected to a bunch of them? Is there a personality trait amongst them that is similar that you could have probably said from an early age on, they were probably more of the caregiver type person? You'd said you're the caretaker of a family member with also, like, there's a certain person that can take that on
Right.
Own it, be very good at it, and not have it overwhelm them, because it can be very overwhelming. Do you see that?
Yeah, absolutely. It definitely, you have to be someone who has an excess of compassion, because you are taking on the weight of that incredibly emotional experience, possibly for 8 or 9 months, where you're the person that someone who is highly stressed is calling and leaning on and asking questions of. You have to be selfless, and you really have to be incredibly committed, because babies come whenever they want, and sometimes in the TD Bank parking lot, right?
Right.
So you have to be able to give it all up. We miss holidays and we miss birthdays and weddings and time with our family a lot.
So let me ask, so that's a great point. It's not just a like leading up to birth type thing. This is people select this path early on. Is that kind of accurate?
So people either hire us as soon as they pee on the stick and find out they're pregnant, because they're like, oh shit, like this is real.
Right.
Or they wait until they're like 32 to 36 weeks pregnant and realize that a human being is coming out of their body, and then they panic and they call us. So, we support them throughout the pregnancy, but most people, when they're hiring a doula, are doing it because they want us to be there the day of. Like, that's what they envision when they think of the support.
Percentage wise, if you had to give a percentage, which one is more of the almost like a life coach kind of commitment level, where somebody employs a coach to help them through a segment of time in their life? How many of them are more the life coach commitment component versus the I need you for game day commitment?
Well,
maybe not just for you, but overall in the doula world, if you have an overall understanding.
I would say a lot of people think about this support as being for the day of. Like, most people, when they call us, are thinking about that. But in order to do our job well, we have to prepare them prenatally through education, because when you're in labor, you're like on drugs. You're in a completely different astral plane.
Right.
So you can't really cognate very well. So we spend a lot of time during the pregnancy letting them know what their choices are, helping them understand the different interventions that are common, and reminding them that hospital policy is not law. Just because, someone in a white coat or in scrubs says we're going to do something this way doesn't mean that it's best for you, and doesn't mean that you have to do it.
I think that's, and just, thinking about COVID and how, whether you are a vaccine person or a mask person or a social distance person, or you were the guy like me who was like, fuck it, I like doorknobs, whatever. I don't care what side you're on. I think people forget the sovereignty that they possess with their own body. And that when a doctor tells you, you must do this, that you are under no moral, ethical, or legal obligation to follow anything they say. If they say, we're not checking you out, you can walk the fuck out.
Yeah.
You're not in chains. There's not an armed guard going to shoot you when you walk out. Like, people think that they have this level of power over top of them. Any medical person, you don't have to take the direction or orders of anybody,
right,
as a sovereign person. And I think we agree on that part. And law enforcement, granted, there's laws we have to follow. There are things that keep you from, murdering other people and robbing banks. But when it comes to your medical choices, you have, unless you are deemed unfit and incapable, you have the right to pick and choose. And I think a lot of people, especially younger mothers, may not know, that your type of thing exists,
right,
and B, that they have choices, even if they don't know and then they don't use a doula, that they have choices on how their process is going to go, and to ask questions and say, okay, that don't sound right. what other options do I have? And if you don't like the options that you were given, you can ask for other options from another person. So how many people know about you? Like if you said, like, because I didn't, obviously, but I'm a man, but how many people are using doulas as part of their birthing process in general population type things?
So 10 to 15% of the population will hire a doula for birth support, and less for postpartum support. And that's like a whole different avenue where we come and basically teach you how to take care of your baby and do the care for the baby so you can sleep.
Which is vital too.
Oh my God, it's amazing. Yeah. But so yeah, 10 to 15% of people use doulas, and it's because they don't really know that the service exists, or they think that they can go into a hospital and trust the medical professionals to have their best interest at heart. Most medical professionals got into this line of work because they want to take care of people. They are compassionate. They care about the human race. They want to make the world better through medicine. And then they're employed by a hospital system that overtaxes them in terms of what is expected. Our OBs in this area have 7 minutes per patient during their average prenatal care. 7 minutes to inform you, to educate you, to learn about you, to examine you. It's not enough time.
That's because of the corporate component to medicine.
You got it.
Right. So, and I think that this is going to be such a great episode because we can touch on a lot of things that, in addition to why, because a lot of the lack of information about whether it's doulas or any other type of alternative medicine or options, is based around the policy making of corporate entities that control medical practices, whether they're small or large or hospitals or whatever. There's always some, Tower Health or Mainline Health or whatever that is overseeing the operational level of what a doctor, who is a skilled professional who has compassion and wants to spend more time typically with their patient to get to know them better.
Yep.
But can't because of the expectations and pressure that are placed upon them.
You got it, right? They're answering to people in administration who don't have a medical degree, or they're answering to insurance companies. We know they don't have medical degrees, right? Like, these are people who are making policies and dictating care and really tying the hands of medical professionals. And in Pennsylvania, the medical malpractice rates are astronomical. And so doctors tend to lean in the direction of intervening more than maybe medically necessary as a CYA, right? If they offer this intervention and the baby, God forbid, dies, right, then they can say, well, I followed textbook care, I did what is considered best practices. And then that mitigates the risk of lawsuit for them, right? So they're afraid. And they practice from a fear-based standpoint.
I think it's very similar. So law enforcement is a lot of what you do as a cop, or let me rephrase it. A lot of the life or death things that you would need to be able to do well as a cop are relegated down to a once a year, maybe an hour or two of training.
Yeah.
For CYA, for the state to go, yep, he qualified with his handgun. Just because I can stand statically on a line and shoot at a paper target with no pressure or anything around me doesn't make me capable or proficient in handling a life or death situation. And that is no different than when a doctor gets 7 minutes with a patient and has to figure out what is best for that patient when they really don't have the working knowledge of that individual moment's needs.
Yeah. I tell people all the time, right? Like, there's standard care of medicine, right? Which is targeted at the most at-risk population in the nation. If we cover them, then we cover everyone beyond. And so that does not mean that's the best medical care for you, right? There's protocol and then there's people. So we can use the protocol as a starting point, but you need to know your own biology. You need to know your own preferences, where your comfort level is, your history. You take all of that into consideration and you become part of the decision-making team. It's a very different experience than if you go into a hospital and you say, I don't know anything about how to have a baby, so all the responsibility is on you. Figure it out and do the best by me that you can. That's not fair to put on the medical staff either.
And I think and I look at where my brain's going is, what you do for the birthing process, pre and postnatal care. There are so many other at-risk groups. When I say at-risk, meaning that there are high-risk probabilities to the process that they're going through. Meaning childbirth is a high-risk process. There's potential for loss of life of the baby and the mother. There's complications that could come from it. There could be long-term physical disability with a child if something is done improperly. Like, there's a lot of things that can go wrong. If you look at, and I'm sure there are, and maybe they have a different, less difficult name to pronounce, but they're like advocates, right? But I don't think people realize, first of all, I think people put a negative connotation on help, right? Nobody wants to ask for help because if they ask for help, it means they don't trust what's in front of them or can't discern for themselves what's in front of them. When I would argue that most of what's in front of you medically, you have no fucking reason to know about, right? Why would you know all of the risks, all of the potentials, anything? Like, you're not a doctor. I'm not a doctor. I don't know what's all in front of me. I do know me. I know what I have history of. I know what my strengths and weaknesses are physically. I know where I am less healthy and more healthy. But I don't know, when a doctor tells me this is what I would do, whether or not that is the best thing for me. And if you don't have an advocate or a doula to help you, guide you through those things, I think you're woefully shortchanging your future because you refuse to acknowledge that you don't know the answers, and maybe somebody can help you find them.
I'm definitely seeing the idea of a doula being an important part of the labor support in this area. It's kind of taking a foothold. I've been doing this work for 8 years, and I would say that when I got into it, there were a lot of people who had no idea what a doula was. But now, people talk, right? And so you either have a really terrible first experience and you go on this mission to make your next experience different, and then you hire a doula, or you have a friend who says, oh my God, you have to hire a doula. And then they start looking into it. So it is taking a foothold in this area. And people around here, Matt, they like experts, they like authorities. We live in an area where people defer responsibility and judgment to someone who knows more. And so a lot of our clientele are highly educated individuals who know that they don't know all of it, and they want someone to walk side by side with them. And, a lot of people say they want us to be their advocate. I don't consider myself an advocate. I consider myself someone who builds a bridge between you and your provider so that you can have a conversation. I create space for a conversation, and I translate if the two parties are not hearing each other. If they're talking past each other, I stop and intervene.
You find that amongst medical professionals, OBGYNs specifically, that doulas are appreciated and respected for their role in that, like you just explained?
I would say that there's a mix, just like in any profession. King of Prussia Doulas has a really good reputation in this area with medical professionals because we don't come in as vigilantes. We're not trying to tear down the medical system and just get patients to completely disregard medical advice. We help to encourage dialogue. And so there are a lot of OBs in this area that will recommend our practice because they know that we're part of the team. We're not an adversary. There are some OBs who have had really shit interactions with doulas who like have kind of gone rogue and, you know, basically counter everything the OB says. They're going to say the opposite. Like nobody needs that. That's not helping anybody.
I think, you know, so I look at my personality. So, and I don't know, are there male doulas?
There are, I like to call them mullahs. I don't know if they call them that.
I would not be a good mullah because I am always contrary.
Mm-hmm.
Like when it comes to,
I am too.
when I feel there is, I call it the big dick syndrome. You know, everybody wants to do is the biggest dick in the male world. When I feel I'm in that competition, I go full on biggest dick. And that's just how I react because I feel like there's this energy against me that's pushing me and not going to give me the value of my knowledge and understanding. So rather than try to convince them that I'm worthy of having a conversation with, I go straight vaporize. That's just how it's a shortcoming of mine that I'm very well aware of. One I try to work on.
Matt, I've got the biggest dick in the room. Okay. Like that's who I am everywhere else except the delivery room. Because
I think you have there's that, and where I think the important component to your personality that I don't have. I am empathetic of individuals in individual moments, but I don't have an overall empathy for any one group or thing. I don't have it. I've never been. I can, if you tell me your problem, I can empathize with you and I can help you fix your problem. But if you are part of a collective that has a collective problem, I don't do collectives. I don't have the bandwidth to own, because when I own all. And I think it's because it overwhelms me emotionally and psychologically when there's too much that I feel I need to fix. And I know I don't have the capability to do it. So I shut down. Yeah. But I'm good with a 1 or 2 person thing. So I think you have a gene in you, a trait in you that allows you to have a broader empathetic approach to certain parts of your life that I may, or because I'm even in law enforcement, I don't have an empathetic gene. I'm a very triage guy. I'm going through what is the most damaging thing we got to work through right now until we get to the least. And I work through that process, and that's how it happens. Domestic violence victims, it's just while I understand you're in a bad situation, I'm not owning your situation. Right. You know what I'm saying? So I can't get there in my profession. Personally, I can get there with them if they called me and we were friends and they needed my help. But in my profession, I can't. I think as a professional, you have something within your personality that allows you to have that shut off valve for the biggest dick in the room that allows you to open up this other part of you. Well, you know, I think it came with experience, right? So at first, when I became a doula, I was changing the birth situation for people in the future, right? Like I was going to protect them from having my experience. And I quickly learned that that wasn't going to change the birth culture in this area. Me coming in and being a dick and, you know, like putting down the medical model. One, it didn't serve my clients who wanted the medical model, who wanted to trust their doctors, who wanted to choose a cesarean and not feel guilty about it. Yeah, there was a lady who looked at me and asked if I was disappointed that she chose a C-section. I'm like, I don't care. You're going to meet your baby. But that changed me that day because what I had said to her prenatally left an impact that I had judgment about how she should have her baby, right? So as I matured as a doula, I found that if I could build a positive relationship with the doctors and nurses in this area, that they trust me, that then we could sit at the table together as equals or close to equals and have conversations. Now in the birth room,
doctors will defer to me and ask, like, there's not a protocol for using a breast pump to encourage labor instead of Pitocin. What are your thoughts on it? How have you seen it used? We can converse about stuff like that isn't medical, but it's still an intervention, right? And that wouldn't have happened if I was always trying to keep my ego elevated above theirs.
I think that shows, and you said it right, you matured. And I think that self-awareness and knowing that your words matter in when people entrust in you, right? When someone says, I'm going to give you my trust to help me through this process, and whatever you said that resonated with her, that when the outcome was a cesarean C-section, that she felt as if maybe she let you down, that would crush me. So yeah. I understand the value, and I think that's part of why my approach to chaos, because I think no matter whether it's childbirth or getting into a shooting, it's chaos.
Yeah.
And how you manage chaos is how you succeed or don't succeed in life. People that can't see the forest through the trees, or people that literally can see every stick along the way and appreciate each stick during the hell of chaos.
Right.
And I think certain people are wired to handle it differently than others, but how you train your brain to handle the chaos, how you train your emotional level, how you control those emotional spikes and drops is the key to being successful in any chaotic environment. And I've trained myself because of the volume of death I've seen in 30 years. And even in situations like when my wife's sister died, I was sad. I was heartbroken for my wife's family, for my kids, for my nephews, for her husband, like everybody. But I put that away and I became the manager of the scene.
Yep.
Because I know what happens now.
Mm-hmm.
The things that no human being should ever witness from a dead body, especially somebody that you love, you can't be here for that.
Right.
But everybody wants to be there because they don't want to leave the room, because they don't want to say goodbye, and they don't want to walk away for the last time the person they loved for all those years. So I understand that, but I couldn't be in that capacity. I had to be the guy that goes, all right, this is your training. This is what you've been doing your entire life. Essentially, you have to manage this so you limit the amount of external trauma that is going to follow if they stay past a certain point, right? So I'm built to go triage mode versus support.
Yeah, you compartmentalize.
Right. And I think for me, that works. It doesn't work for everybody. And not everybody understands how I do that or why that is how I am in those situations. Every horrible event of my life, people are like, you were the most methodical and calm person ever. And it's not right or wrong. It's just how I'm able to come out of these things not traumatized.
Right. Right. It's a coping mechanism.
100%. So as a doula, who is an emotional support mechanism for their client, who is a process control mechanism for their client, who is a hopefully outcome preparer, when things don't go well, what is your process, and how have you found that the reaction from your clients who maybe it was their first time using a doula? Have you found that if they had subsequent children, they steered away from, if there was a negative outcome, if you've ever had one, did they steer away from that process and go the more traditional route, or did they embrace that it's just the way things happen? How did that work out?
Yeah. So a little bit of a loaded question there. It's not our job to create an outcome. We can't promise that you'll have a vaginal delivery or that your baby will survive the process of labor even. We are there to create space for choice. And I think that when I look at my job, I sobbed the first time I did a home birth transfer from a home planned VBAC at home to hospital transport. It wasn't working. She wasn't in danger, but it wasn't working. And we were going to the hospital, and she ended up having a cesarean, and I sobbed, feeling like I had failed my client. I really had to come to terms with that, Matt, because it's not my body. Right? I'm not the baby, and I'm not the medical providers who can determine what's right or wrong in this situation. I'm just there to offer guidance, wisdom, love, compassion. And so over time, I was able to separate my role as being someone who prepares and empowers versus expecting a particular outcome. And I think that we do a really good job of educating and informing people. And there's a very different scenario that happens if you go to a hospital and they hook you up to a bunch of machines and they pump you through with a bunch of meds, and they determine the labor positions that you're allowed to use, and they determine when you're too tired, and they determine when you have a cesarean. That creates one story in someone's life versus going in and knowing that you have a choice to be hooked up or not, right? And determining whether or not you want to, and knowing that at any time you can say, I'm all done with these things. I want it to stop. To being part of the conversation for every intervention and having choices and making those choices. At the end of the day, you can have two labors that are exactly the same. I was with a lady about 9 months ago, and
not that the 9 months for whole childbirth was even part of this process. But
no, but I attended her birth almost 9 months ago. And as an observer, I was like, oh my God, every single thing she didn't want to have happen happened. Like everything that a woman hires a doula because she doesn't want, it all happened. And as an outsider, I was like, oh, this was intense. She was like, this is the best labor ever. This is the best experience ever. You guys are amazing. I love all of you. She felt so good because she was in control every step of the way. And that is priceless.
I love that.
Do people hire us if they don't get the birth that they want a second time? It depends. We have the Austin DeVanzo Fund at our company, which is it's a fund that we have for one of our babies that was lost at full term. His family chooses to donate to us every year so that we can provide free bereavement doulas in the event of a loss or a miscarriage. So we provide support to community members if, something tragic happens, thanks to that family who funds that support. They've hired us again, and they had a beautiful, beautiful baby girl. So they rewrote their story, and brought light to, a very difficult time. But there are people who have cesareans and choose to have repeat cesareans. There are people who have cesareans and choose to VBAC with us. It's so personal. Really depends.
I love the whole concept. To me, it's fascinating. To me, it's almost mystical in its intent. Like I'm now, as I get older, I'm going to be 51 in a week and a half or so, and I love exploring different ways of spiritual and medical understandings and what's out there. Like if 2020 did anything, it made me believe nothing is impossible, right? So whether you take that positive or negatively, nothing is off the table in my book. So there's nothing that I won't look at and go, yeah, it's not going to happen. Or no, there's no way that could ever happen. Or that's not true. Mm-hmm. Everything is let me look a little more. So right. I found myself looking in areas that I typically would have never had any interest in, mm-hmm. like ground-based medicines. I would have never thought of what are what are the pros and cons of that? And then understanding the difference between why big pharma exists and why would, say, cannabis be labeled as the evil, it's like the Empire Strikes Back and Darth Vader, and marijuana is the gateway drug, right? So it's like the Darth Vader of health. Mm-hmm. Maybe, and I don't know the answers, but I go, okay, why? Everything is a why to me now. Mm-hmm. Why would I take Vicodin or any other opioid when I know now the addiction level and overdose level from it?
Right.
What is the alternative? What are the alternatives? Because there's multiple alternatives to that. If I'm in need of pain reduction and I can't manage it, what are my options? And if one of them is cannabis, and cannabis is grown in the earth and has been around for as long as the earth has been around, and there's very few cases of true cannabis addiction and overdose. There are people that will abuse it because that's just natural, but not by its own nature is it addictive. You know what I'm saying? It's not going to draw you in the same way that an opioid would.
Right.
And having been in law enforcement for 30 years, I can tell you that opioids are the single greatest, most damaging in every level that you could possibly think of thing that's ever happened to law enforcement.
Yep.
Ever. It's worse than crack. It's the worst thing ever because it's so easy to get. There are so many doctors overprescribing. There's so many pill bottles in medicine cabinets. Yep. Even if they're not being used by the person they were prescribed for because they only need them for a couple of days and they stop, they sit there and then it becomes an open opportunity. So I've learned about so many things that I'm not 100% sure on any of it. Mm-hmm. But again, I'm asking why. And I'm willing to look at everything and go, why wouldn't I try that? Or why wouldn't that be a possibility for me? Right. Like a doula, and go, okay, I've learned over the last 2.5 years that, if my mom was in a home, gets COVID, I may never see her again.
Right.
Well, there's no reason she has to stay in that home.
Right.
Right. There are, if I'd have messaged any human being on the planet, and especially moms who are about to be, or people are about to be, women are about to become moms, you're not stuck.
Yeah.
You're not. No one's ever stuck. You choose to be stuck.
Yeah.
There are options upon options upon options to every single fundamental problem on the fucking planet.
Yep. You always have choice.
Always. And if you say, I can't, it's always an I won't.
Yeah.
And I think having someone like you and people like you in your profession who have the ability through your particular vernacular and way that you explain things, because you say you are that space creator, that communication bridge. And there is a way to do that effectively so that your client recognizes that they're not stuck. And I think that's one of the greatest, if anything I've done in the last 2.5 years through all the turmoil I've been through on social media and professionally, with some of the things I believe in, is giving people the pathway to understanding, not the answers, but this is the direction you could probably look in to find some. And I hope that this podcast is another one of those opportunities for people who feel like maybe they're not going to have any more children because it was just such a bad experience.
Yeah.
Or I just always thought this was just the only thing I could do is go this route.
Yeah.
Having an opportunity to show them they're not stuck with their childbirthing needs and options is important.
Yeah. Because when you feel like you have a sense of control, it changes the entire dialogue from that point forward, right? It is when we feel we are beholden to the will of someone else that things get scary. No one wants to be controlled. And yet, lots of people acquiesce all of the responsibility to medical providers. Like, you see it online all the time. My doctor won't let me, whatever, fill in the blank. Your doctor is not your mom. They are not going to ground you if you decide not to do what they say. You have choice. Your doctor is offering medical advice, which you may choose to accept or not. Matt, like, we fire people all the time, right? You have a bank that upsets you, you fire them. You have a bad plumber, you fire them. But for some reason, people have bad relationships with doctors and they don't think that they can fire them.
I think it's almost like a historical messaging manipulation tactic that, and it's not, I don't know if it's on some way, I believe it was intentional, but it's also, it's passed down, it's hereditary, right? So you get, your mom and dad may be like, you go to the dentist every 6 months because they said you need to go every 6 months or your teeth's going to fall out of your face, or whatever the medical advice, the habitual components, which then get you in to seeing these people and then get you into this relationship where you feel as if it's a requirement to do it.
Yeah.
And I don't say that my choices as a human being on my own body have been the best always, but they were mine.
Right.
And if they didn't work out, there's not anyone else I'm going to look at and say, you screwed up.
Right. It's your fault.
It's my fault. And you hit on it so many times today that so many people, they delegate that responsibility to their medical professional because they don't want to make that decision for themselves, right, or don't want to put in the effort to ask questions and find out what other options are out there.
Yeah.
Which I think is also
like you said, they've been trained to think that they don't have the ability to do it, right?
There's so many conversations I've had over the last few years where after I can then talk with someone, like, well, I didn't know that. I had no idea. I can do that.
Mm-hmm.
No one ever told me that. In a world, and when we were younger, I tell the story all the time. When I was a little kid, I'd be laying up in my bedroom. It's 11 o'clock at night. The Phillies are playing a late game for us, early game in Los Angeles against the Dodgers. And I'd have my transistor radio and I'm sitting in my bed and listening to the Phillies game. And it's about time for me to go to sleep. It's the fifth inning. And I don't know who won the game. And I can't find out who won the game until the late paper of the Inquirer comes out, right? I won't be able to know until like 1 o'clock in the afternoon the next day who won, because there's no avenue for me to find that out.
Right.
I now know every pitch as it happens, where it was in the strike zone. Was it a strike? Was it a ball? Was it a curveball, a changeup, slider, fastball? I know everything about everything at the moment it happens. There's absolutely no reason why any human being on the planet should not have the ability to at least get better educated in a matter of a couple keystrokes and maybe 20 minutes of their time to understand some of the stuff we talked about today. And I think having a podcast and having a business where you are educating people who then go out and share that education with other people. Like you said, yours is pretty much probably a lot of referral-based business.
All word of mouth, Google and word of mouth.
And I used to own Max Out Strength Studio. Shout out to Max Out. Shut down in COVID. We had a gym for 11 years. We had a gym that was based on a piece of patented equipment we had patented that allowed people to get stronger 1 day a week. You only lift 1 day a week. And we averaged 20 to 25% strength gains after 14 workouts. It's not easily accepted in the people that are trying to get stronger world, because traditionally it's a 3 to 4 day a week process. And whether you're push, pull, high, low, chest back, whatever the mix of muscle groups you do on each day and how much you do of that, it was all based on some dudes or gals voodoo on how to get stronger. And none of them are wrong. Just one of them was scientifically right. And when I would tell people that if you think about your body in its totality, not just in your bicep muscle, but that if you put the external pressure on your body, I said, it's like a car with brakes or a car with shocks. If you're doing burnouts and slamming on your brakes, you might have brand new brakes, but you're gonna have to replace them every 6 months.
Yeah.
Because you're doing so much wear and tear on them. If you train the body, understanding that the connective tissue in each joint has shelf life, and the more external force and friction you're placing on those joints during movement periods is causing micro tears within those connective tissues, the things that aren't meant to tear, muscles are. At some point in time, you're going to need to get your ACL repaired or your cartilage replaced or your UCL ligament in your elbow, whatever it is. And I would try to explain to people that that's why Max Out works, but it was all word of mouth as to why people came, because there's no way I could in a 30-second pitch explain why Max Out works. The only reason Max Out was successful was because we had everybody that came in, and after 14, maybe they said, okay, it worked once, but let me try it again, and it worked again, and then it just kept working for years. They would just tell everybody, and then we became successful. And I think that's what's going to be. It's a slow process, but I think what I hope for is that from this podcast, there are more women, more couples out there going, we don't have all the answers and we need some guidance and we need to know what our options are. And someone like Lacey will be a really good option and a good advocate for us to be able, I know you're not an advocate, but somebody that can talk to us and talk for us with the medical professionals so that the conversation can begin.
Yeah. That's all that it is. Bringing a doula to your birth is like taking the birth class with you. You're taking the birth handbook in a real live human who can in real time assess the situation and offer advice that, is outside of just the medical approach. Sometimes I'm standing in the room saying, yeah, what your doctor is recommending sounds like a really, really good idea. And any alternative that I can offer is just going to slow the road to that same outcome.
Right.
And sometimes I'm there making recommendations because the doctor has seen less physiologically natural births than I have. Like we work together to change the world of birth.
I love that the visual you just gave of the birthing book or birthing class brought into the birthing room in real time, because there's, we talked a little bit about the chaos of life and the chaos of our environments, being a cop and being a doula, that when you're in the chaos, when you're the husband or the woman giving birth, you're not seeing things. You're not identifying, assessing things. You're going, what the fuck? And somebody please do something, right? Those are the two things that are happening, or get this fucking baby out of me. Those are the things that are happening. And if there's not someone who's not in the weeds, in the chaos, saying, take a breath, holding the dad's hand going, I got you.
Right.
This is gonna be fine. Like, I think that's the most valuable thing that you could possibly give to a couple who's in the midst of the most traumatic and high expectation and high worry moment of their life. They're bringing their child into the goddamn world.
Yeah.
Every day after is going to be chaos.
Absolutely. And that's why they hire us afterwards to do that. I think that it's scary, right? Like, and if someone says to you, if you don't do this, your baby will die. What are you going to do? Of course, you're going to do exactly what they recommend. And if you're not armed with the information that it's like a 0.003 risk increase to a 0.006 risk, but we're still talking less than 1% chance, like the chance of your baby dying doubles if you're not induced by 41 weeks. Okay, but it's still less than 1%.
Right.
That's a risk that I'm willing to take, right? What's my risk of dying if you induce me? Right. It's higher than that, right? Especially in America. So, our You had kind of hit on the idea that we're emotionally invested. And yes, I think the doulas are compassionate people. We care about our clients. We hope for the goal of the birth that they want. But I don't love you the way that your husband does. I'm not emotionally invested in you in a way that causes me to be blind to what's happening, right? I am objective and able to then see a broader picture and also bring in all of the births, the experience of all the births and all the different places that I've attended births, to be able to say like, yeah, this is a good idea, or there are things that we could do that are different that you can try first.
I think you hit it right, and I overly simplified an environment where I used a broad term of emotion, where there are specific emotions that are categorically make you objective with your personality profile that allows you to stay objective with compassion, objective with empathy, objective with hope, objective with all those other things that are required for you to give, to uplift and calm the people that you're there to help, right? So and I think there is it's important to clarify that. And I have to probably clarify me a little bit in that I'm not a robot when I'm on calls.
Right, of course not.
I am compassionate, and I offer words of condolences and things like that. But my focus allows me to handle the situation in a process-driven, worst to first type environment, which I explain that way so people understand that I'm not, I may appear to be less than empathetic, less than emotionally connected to the situation at hand in many cases. I'll give you an example. A child dies and I have to go and investigate that, whether it's a drowning or in SIDS or God forbid, a murder. It fucking crushes me that a child is dead.
Right.
Like on a deep level. But in that moment, it's a crime scene.
Right.
And it's a process. Because if I don't follow that process, then possibly the person who is to blame for that horrific event won't get prosecuted and found guilty. So there's a cause and effect of
the emotion, Matt. Like if you invest yourself as if it were you or your child every time,
it would be exhausting. It would be done. Yeah.
Yeah, you have to separate, and that's how it is for us too. We cannot be invested in the outcome in terms of how the baby comes out.
Right.
We have to be invested in supporting parents to know their choices, but I absolve us of any responsibility to the final outcome. That is determined by the C-section rate of where you deliver, or your provider who doesn't know their C-section rate but should. It's ultimately the outcome is between you and your doctor.
Right.
I'm just there to make sure that you have choices.
Well, I love it. We could do this all night long, all day long. I keep saying night, but it feels like night. Maybe it's because I'm tired. But I love unique conversations. I love the energy we had that sitting on that little table outside the shopping center there by the gym, and just sharing our funny stories, and I'm glad that we were able to get you on the podcast.
Me too, Matt.
I will make sure that this will be up today, and that you'll get copies, and you can put it on whatever you want to put it on, and share it with all your friends and fellow doulas, and maybe some mullahs, and let them know that there's a guy that gave birth to or helped deliver a child and he gave birth, thank God, and never wants to do it again, and that they're a special kind of human being for being there for that process. So is there a website where people can find you, email, anything you want to put out for you?
Yeah. So fun little thing before I share that information. Today, March 22nd, is the first day of World Doula Week. So when I said pick this day, I wasn't thinking about that on the calendar. And so it's a fun way to ring in this year's World Doula Week to celebrate.
There you go. Told you, God's got a sense of humor.
Yeah. So where can you find us? You can find us at kingofprussiadoulas.com, or if you want to go easy, KOPDoulas, DOULAS.com. We're on Facebook by the same name, Instagram, KOP Doulas. I'm not really big on social media. We do a lot of word of mouth and in-person, educating. So I don't worry too much about the social media, but our website's the place to go.
Awesome. Well, hang tight. We're going to talk off air. Everybody, thank you for listening to this episode and watching when you finally get this on YouTube, to this episode of the 2 Dates and a Dash podcast. Thank you again to Lacey for being my special guest and sharing her amazing gifts with the world. And hopefully, if you are an expecting couple or a mother who's expecting a child and you are interested in having somebody who's there to provide support and give you your options and be a bridge in communication between you and your medical provider, please reach out to Lacey and kingofprussiadoulas.com. And once again, if you want to learn more about me, go to mattcubbler.com. You can get a copy of A Brother's Love, a memoir there. And don't forget to like and subscribe wherever you listen or watch podcasts. All right, everybody, God bless, and go out and be kind to one another.
Was conceived in darkness in a time when men weren't free. The birthing pains brought to life the star that rose to glory. She grew up in pain and strife, unsure of who she'd be, in a time when brave men gave their lives to a history. Sometimes you need to take a stand for more than just a song. Take courage, face your fears, and let a freedom right for wrongs. When will we wake and finally see she's worth fighting for? She's waiting by the door for us to open up and rise and be silent.